Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Project StuG. In the last episode, you'll have seen how I 3D printed the fighting compartment and engine deck. I then spent several hours correcting the dimensions and truing the parts up. In this episode, I finally get stuck into the detail, after a few detours, which I hope you'll find interesting. Scratch building a project like this isn't like linear kit building. Sometimes things need to be redesigned. Sometimes more research is needed, stalling a part of the build. In this case, I needed to 3D print and cast some hinges for the loader's hatch. So, to make the print job more economical, I set to work designing some other parts. I planned to sculpt a full crew for the StuG, and after discovering that the average German in 1940 was 5 foot 9 inches tall, I printed out some plans and designed some body parts in CAD. Sculpting a figure even partially will help me get a real feel for how the StuG was used, worn and lived in, and recreate that realistically. This may seem a scattered approach to the project, but these are all items that need to be produced, and doing it this way allows me to resolve other problems on the project sooner. I also modelled a track link. Creating tangible parts with which I can get a sense of actual scale will help to keep textures and details in scale throughout the project. This may all seem a bit wonky, but it's how I work, and this isn't a shake and bake model. With the print job fully loaded, I could now set it running. A few hours later, and this is what I've got. The Precision 1.5 printer has done an excellent job on the parts. I've added some pegs to the hinges and installed some track pins from 1mm stainless steel into the track link. Now I just have to convert these parts into metal. To do that, I use my standard method of cold cure silicon moulds. You can find out more about this process and others in my how-to series. And these are the raw castings, with all the feeds and vents still attached. Everything has come out well. This will certainly help me with so many aspects of the StuG build. After a quick clean-up, this is a full set of parts from the moulds. It's a lot of work for just a few hinges, but that's what it takes. I could have made them using other techniques, but I knew this method would work for me. While all that mould making was going on, I decided to tackle the weld seams on the fighting compartment. To cut them into the 3D printed ABS, I used an appropriately sized drill in my Dremel and run it along a straight edge. I do this in a series of light strokes and clean the channel up afterwards with a file. This leaves the channel of uniform width and plenty of depth, ready for the weld bead to be applied. It took a while to go over the fighting compartment and cut all the weld channels, as well as cut the openings for the cupola and other details. At the same time I drilled out the holes for the bolts that secure the top of the fighting compartment in place. To add the weld beads, I used a technique demonstrated on a fellow YouTuber's channel. Night Shift is an excellent channel, which is a great resource for anyone making armour models. I'm going to use milliput to recreate my weld beads, but first of all I need to make a tool. To do this I need the following: a glass, some epoxy, an old paintbrush, a scalpel, some tin snips, and a can of my favourite medicine. The first thing I have to do is empty the can, then use the tin snips to cut out a strip of aluminium. About 1 cm wide and about 5 cm long should be fine. One end of this strip needs to be cut into a long curve. This is then rolled into a tapered tube. With the bristles cut off the old paintbrush, the tube is then epoxied onto the end. And there you have a weld bead tool. Now to apply some welds to the fighting compartment. I'll need a sculpting tool, old paintbrush, new tool, and some milliput. With the milliput mixed, I worked it well into the weld groove I'd previously cut. Excess milliput is cleaned away, and the groove is smoothed out with a damp old brush. I can then start using the new tool to recreate the weld bead in the milliput. It takes me a few attempts as it's important to get the angle of the tool consistent, but with practice I get a result I'm happy with. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that the securing bolts are in place. These were sourced from Prime Miniatures, who specialise in small hardware for modelers. I had a total up of all the nuts and bolts I needed for the StuG, and ordered what I needed online. A couple of days later, my hardware arrived. Prime Miniatures produce nuts and bolts from M1.6 down to M.6, which is incredibly small. There's a link to the site in the description. I've been working on the StuG in my CAD software, gradually creating the parts, and wanted to tackle the cupola. This was fairly straightforward to design, once I'd worked out how it was constructed and how best to 3D print the parts. These were then 3D printed on my Ultimaker 2 Plus in ABS. Here you can see the main turret of the cupola in the slicer software, being checked and prepared for the printer. While the printer was busy, I cut the periscopes from a sheet of polycarbonate. They'll be painted separately and installed behind the clear screens, as per the real StuG. I printed a detailed liner to go inside the cupola, and as things started to look better and better, I decided to go with an open hatch. The basic part of the hatch and hinge was then 3D printed and fitted into place. The 3D printed upper ring to which the screens were attached could then be added. The detail inside the hatch was added using brass rod, hardware from Prime Miniatures, and plasticard for the leather head pad. The latches were 3D printed, and the bump stop was cut from styrene. Other details such as the machine gun mount and the shot deflector were also 3D printed in ABS. Now, let's see how it all goes together. As you can see, I've got a bit carried away and open up the loader's hatch as well. It looks like those cast hinges will have to work for real now. The cupola is now permanently installed and all the weld beads are in place. They all look to scale and I think flow in the right direction. From looking at plenty of photos of StuG welds, they're pretty messy on the real thing. I think my attempt has come out well. I'm very happy with the result. I plan to display the StuG with the commander sitting in his hatch and the gunner sitting on the loader's hatch. There won't be an interior. I think there'll be enough going on with the StuG not to need one. I've made a good start to the detailing, even though my progress may seem a bit haphazard. Hopefully the next episode will be a bit more organised, when I plan to tackle the main armament, amongst other things. I hope you find Project StuG interesting and enjoy seeing the progress. If you do, hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel to see more from Staples and Vine. If you have any questions about Project StuG, just leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching.